Hey guys, something new here. So we are going to put together 5 quick tips that if you listen to before a test, we guarantee you'll do better on a test.
Yeah.
So these 5 quick tips are as following. So if you cannot verbally recall or explain an idea, then there's gaps in your understanding. So for example,
Okay.
if I want to tell you about how
The solar system
the
works.
solar system works, then if I'm not able to explain how the solar system works, like how
Yeah.
the planets
The
rotate around the
planets,
plan,
yeah.
then you quickly identify your gaps. So make sure whenever you study information that you're able to verbally communicate it back. You'll realize that if you don't fully understand it, you'll have holes.
Yes.
Then you go back and examine those holes.
And that's called the vitamin technique.
Vitamin technique, yeah.
And also, as a little bonus, if you can give examples of the concept that you're trying to verbalize, that's even kudos, like kudo points, that you actually thoroughly understand it.
Yeah, that and analogies. So if you come up with analogies, metaphors, or things of that nature to explain something, that will help you in your grasp of understanding it.
Right.
So tip number 2, always check your test over as many times as possible. So a lot of times in school, people are told, stick with your first answer. That's what your intuition told you to pick. But this has been studied tremendously and proven wrong every time.
Okay.
It's always better to review your test and look over your answers as many times as possible. Now, why does this happen?
Yeah.
So why does it seem like that your intuition is better than rechecking and rethinking through the problems? Well, if we change an answer on a test and then get it wrong, it sticks out in our mind. We see it. We have a bias towards seeing it. So we say, like, dang it, why did I change that answer?
Yeah.
I would have gotten it right had I not done that. But when we change an answer and don't get it right, we rarely see that because we don't focus on problems we got right. We focus on the problems we got wrong.
Yeah. So
So
if you change the answer and you get it right, then you won't notice it.
yeah, so always check as many times as possible.
Yeah, another thing I was going to add to this is make sure you take the full time for a test. A lot of
Yeah.
people just want to leave, but during that extra time, let's say you're 20 minutes you have left, just start retaking the test. Or I usually go back to the questions I have circled, like go back to this if you have time. Type of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, and that was actually my point number 5 was use your time. But there's another part, use
Yeah.
all of your time. So
Don't-
why
yeah.
is it that someone gets a problem right? Why does someone think of a brilliant answer? It's because they've been persistent with the problem
Yeah.
and they've thought through logical steps. Answers don't magically pop into our head. Answers come from spending time with it and thinking about it as logically as possible.
Yes.
So the more time you spend, the more likely you are. So don't finish your test and then walk out. Like we've all seen the guys in the movie who do that,
Yeah.
and like they're considered brilliant. Well, those people probably have like for one,
Super
it's-
IQs or something,
For
yeah.
one, it's like a movie thing,
Yeah.
so it may not even be true. And 2, it's stupid on their part. They should stay and spend the whole time. Anyone who has a high IQ should use all the time possible because they could think of something that could affect an answer to the problem.
In my
before the
opinion,
time
it's
is up.
kind of lazy to walk out of a test early.
It's lazy, yeah.
Because you're just like, I don't care. I just don't want to deal with this anymore. And if you just spent the extra 20 minutes dealing with it, you might improve your score.
Yeah, but if the test is really easy, don't use all your time because it's more logical to not waste your time than to sit there and use it. But
Right.
for the most part, if it's a challenging test, always use your time. Always look over the.
And
things
if
more.
you're taking tests that are that easy, you're probably in the wrong program.
You're probably in the wrong program, yeah.
So
Okay, so on multiple choice problems, a quick trick is never look at the answers before you came up with an answer in your head. So if you have a question, it says, who did this in 1982? Don't look at the answers, like
Yeah.
Bob, Parker, or whatever. Don't look at those because as soon as you look at those, you start
skewed.
trying to confirm those answers in your head. You start
Yeah.
thinking like, oh, I may have heard it may be Bob Barker. Oh, wait, no, I think it's this person.
Yeah.
And as soon as you see it, you start thinking of reasons why it might be that, and you don't look at the problem objectively anymore. You have a bias towards the answers that you see on the paper. So if you think of it first, oftentimes if you know the answer, it should just be right there.
Right.
You pick it.
Yeah.
And then come back and look at it. Remember, don't forget to come back and double check your answers
Yeah.
as many times as possible.
okay. So sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to last point. Okay, so when you're doing a section on a test that requires reading a prompt and then answering questions, or maybe you have, like a bunch of data,
Yeah.
and then you have to read the questions, and then you do the questions. Always read the questions before reading the prompt or looking at the data.
Yeah.
Because you won't know where to look on the data. Our eyes can only fixate on a small part of a paper at a time.
Right.
So if we look at it first, we're really just not using our time effectively. But if we look at the answers first, then we have some idea of how we should look at it. So like
Right.
when you look at the questions that for a reading prompt first, then you know that when I'm reading the section, I should pay close attention because this answer may be shown.
Yeah, and I just want to add a couple of my tips that I use on my test. I have a general format structure when I take a test, and because I'm using this format, I'm more relaxed because I just know what I'm doing. I'm like, yes, this is my format when I take a test, no matter what the test is. So it's very general, multiple choice, prompts, data, whatever it is. First thing I do is when they say go, I don't go. I wait 5 seconds and I breathe and close my eyes and just think of like my favorite song or whatever. And I can guarantee you that those 5 seconds in that 30, 60-minute test will not hurt you time-wise, but it will put you in the mode to actually do the first problem because your adrenaline is pumping, you are rushing, you're like, what's the first problem? And like, you're like, I don't know, A, B, C, D, just, next problem. Like, I don't care. But what I'm trying to say is just
Panic
relax.
is bad. Anxiety is bad for
Yeah.
taking tests. But so do like some breathing beforehand if you're nervous about the test. But realize like a big thing that I found for test anxiety is that you're only going to do as well as you prepared. So once you're there taking the test, you're not going to be able to get that much better of a score by spending more time.
Yeah.
But you will get a better time. So I'm saying stay as long as you can because you might think of more.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you studied right, then you should do well on this test.
Right.
If you didn't study right, then you're in a situation where you're probably not going to do well on this test. So just take the test. You can't change what happened in the past, so don't fixate on it.
Right. Just to finish my format real quick. So the thing I do is I do the 5-second breather, and it's a real 5 seconds, not like a fake short 5 seconds. A real like 1, 2. Which is like, it's hard to do, but I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. The second point I want to say is I do not spend more than like 2 minutes on one problem. Like I'll kind of calculate like how much time am I allowed to spend per problem, and then do a little bit less time per problem because I want to have some buffer at the end. But I like there's an inclination you have of like, oh, like I'm like so close to getting to getting this problem right. I just need like 1 more minute, and you've already spent like 3 minutes on it. And since all the problems are equal, have the same value, it doesn't matter if you got that one right, even if it was the hard one, because the same value is getting 5 easy ones later on. I mean, you want to get those, so make sure you finish the test. But the thing I want to say with that is, while you're going through the test, if you come across that hard problem, just circle it and just say, if I have time, you mark an answer, then you just circle like the number or whatever, like the 42, and then you're like, well, if I have time, I'll go back to it or whatever.
And when you get a test, look how many problems there are. Look briefly at the problems. That way you know how much time you have to spend. Like if there looks like there's a really hard problem at the end, circle it, get everything else done, then come to that hard problem, because you're less likely to get points on that hard question than you are for the ones that you're going to know.
Exactly.
Get the ones you're going to know, and then spend time on that one, because if you weren't going to get points on anyway, you might as well get points on the stuff you actually know.
Yeah, most standardized tests like ACT, SAT, MCAT, GRE, all these, you already should know the number of questions and the amount of time, so you can calculate the amount of time per question.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say before we let you go take your test is to prepare for tests, the best way to do so is to take practice tests. You take practice tests, you figure out what you got wrong, and you try to understand why you got it wrong, then you take another practice test. It's been shown through a lot of different studies that the best preparation for a test is actually taking tests.
Yeah.
So find as many like online tests as you can. Force yourself to do it, because when you encounter a wrong answer, that's where you really can learn, so you can start to see those holes in your understanding.
Yeah.
Also, remember what we said about verbally being able to explain it. You'll see holes, 1, by getting answers wrong, and you'll see holes 2, by being unable to verbally express an idea.
Yeah.
So
I just have, sorry, really small more points, not to hold you off, but the other thing is, so I've done my 5-second breather, I've taken the test, and then I finished the test, and maybe I have like 10 minutes left. The first thing I do is I go back to the circled question. The first thing I do is make sure all my questions are answered. I know that sounds ridiculous. It only takes 10 seconds at the most, but I'm telling you, there are times I've missed like answering questions because like the computer error or something like that. Make sure all the questions are answered. Then you go back and you do your circle questions. If you have time after that, you start retaking the test and making sure that all your questions are answered. And then you just keep going until time is called.
Also, put a check next to any problem that you are absolutely 100% sure about. Just don't waste your time looking over a problem that
you can, but I feel like sometimes there's no need to check. Because you're usually, I mean, it depends on your preferences. And lastly, the most important thing I want to say is do not cram the night before. Study on even intervals, and make sure that you sleep well. Sleep is much more important than any like 2-hour cramming segment that you did. I guarantee you, because it's we did a podcast on it. But the point is, just make sure you sleep well. Sometimes before like a big test, the day before, I don't really even do anything related.
Well,
to
if you're
the
gonna cram, make sure you cram like before your bedtime.
At least, at least cram so that your circadian rhythm is kept.
Yeah, I mean, cramming will help you, and it will help you do well on a test. But your retention of the information will be far less than if you had studied in longer time. But don't sacrifice sleep for cramming a lot of times. A lot of times you lose if you can avoid it. There might be times where you can't avoid it.
Yeah.
But thanks for watching. I hope this stuff helps for your test, and peace.
All right, thanks.